Hello, my name is Erfan and I am a motion designer. In this short course, we are going to learn how we can animate this scene using 3 principles of animation. 12 principles of animation are the most important thing in the motion design, but I think anticipation, follow-through and overlap in action and a squash and stretch are more important than the rest of them. We will start with a quick overview on these 3 principles, then we learn how we can apply them in After Effects with simple examples, and lastly we put them into a fun practice. For a class project, students can animate this cat and they will also have the access to the cat files in order to use them as reference. Once again, welcome, let's start. In this video, we are going to be talking about 3 principles of animation among 12 principles, which there are anticipation, follow-through and overlap in action, and lastly, squash and stretch. Anticipation is used to prepare the audience for an action and to make the action appear more realistic. There are many examples for that. For example, a character will squat down before pushing his body and legs up into a jump. But let's have a simple example. Take a look at these 2 squares. The top one has the anticipation. As you see, it builds a little energy by rotating back and then moving towards the end. The next one is follow through and overlap in action. When a moving object, such as person, comes to a stop, parts might continue to move in the same direction. Because of the force of forward momentum, these parts might be hair, clothes, jewels, or jiggling flesh of an overweight person. Again, take a look at this example. You see how realistic your animation becomes with anticipation and follow through and overlapping at the same time. And the last one is squash and stretch. Squash and stretch is debatably the most fundamental principle. Look at what happens when a ball hits the ground. The force of the motion squashes the ball flat. But because an object needs to maintain its volume, it also widens on impact. This is what is called squash and stretch. Now, in the next video, we will learn how to create these principles in After Effects. In this video, we are going to learn how we can apply squash and stretch, anticipation, and follow through and overlapping action into our animation. So, let's start with anticipation. In order to create an anticipation for your animation, you need 3 keyframes. So I'm gonna press P to bring up position, and then I'm gonna hold Shift plus R to bring up rotation as well. I'm gonna move towards 1 second, and then I'm gonna set a keyframe on position and rotation. Let's move into 2 seconds and do the same thing. And then lastly, I'm gonna go 3 frames backward, and I'm gonna put another keyframe on position and rotation. So on the 2 second, I'm gonna select my keyframe. I'm gonna move my rectangle in here, and also I'm gonna rotate it by 180 degrees. Let's watch. Let's cut the beginning of our time indicator by pressing B, and the end of it by pressing N. As you see, the movement is linear and it's without anticipation. So let's add anticipation first, and then we deal with graph editor. So to add anticipation, you need to go towards your second keyframe. Let's build up some energy by moving the square a bit backward and also rotate it a bit back. Now let's watch. Alright, good. Now let's apply easings to our animation, and let's set the graph editor on 70. I'm using mute, which I'm gonna tell you later on about this script. So let's watch. Now as you see, the movement is much more realistic. So in order to add follow through and overlapping action, you're gonna need 3 keyframes again. So I'm gonna set a set of keyframes in here, and then 3 frames forward again. I'm gonna do the same. So now when the square is in here, I'm gonna move it a bit forward and when it's in here, I'm gonna move it a bit backward, and on the last one it's gonna be on the same position. So let's watch. As you see, at the end the movement is really fast and really unrealistic. Well, it happened because we didn't set a good timing, and also we didn't set a good easings for our animation. Well, to fix that, I'm gonna select these 3 keyframes, and then I'm gonna apply the normal easings on the After Effect to it, and then I'm gonna extend the spacing a bit more by like 2 frames. I think it should be fine. So let's extend the spacing by 5 keyframes between each one. Now as you see, it looks much better. Well, applying the follow through and overlap in action is really simple, but it requires you to be master at timing and graph editor. But there is an easy expression which can save you a lot of time and make this task for you simple. Well, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna hold Alt and I'm gonna click on this stopwatch in here, and then I'm gonna go towards my expression, and then I'm gonna copy and paste this expression in here, and let's also copy the expression only and then paste it into rotation as well. Now as you see, nothing happened because we need to delete these 2 keyframes because we don't need them, and then we need to move it into 2 seconds, and then let's turn them into linear in order to make this expression work. Now let's watch. Now as you see, on the last step, it has a really good follow through and overlap in action. Well, not only that, you can also change the parameters by changing the amplitude, which stands for the power of your bounce, the frequency is the number, and the decay is how long your animation should be. So now to save this expression as a preset, you can use many plugins such as K-Bar, but I used to use M expressions, which now turned into a plugin called Mute. Mute is a free plugin, but you can have access to more advanced things by paying $2 per month or yearly, something around 20. So to save that preset, I'm just gonna go towards my preset tab, and then I can click on this plus button in here, and then I'm gonna name it, and then I'm gonna paste the expression in here. So I already did that, so I won't do it again. Okay, now let's add the squash stretch to our circle. To do that, we need 3 keyframes. So I'm gonna press P to bring up position. On the 1 second, I'm gonna set a keyframe, and 12 frames forward, I'm gonna set another one. And lastly, on 2 seconds, I'm gonna set another one. Now, when the ball is on 12 frames, I'm gonna move it down like this. Now let's watch. As you see, the movement is linear, so we're gonna turn them into easy ease. But as you see, the ball stops when it hits the ground. So we need to fix that problem. So I'm gonna double click on it, and I'm gonna make the continuous option on, and I'm gonna move it a bit up so our speed doesn't reach 0. So let's watch it again. Okay, good. Now let's add the squash and stretch. Now I'm gonna hold Shift plus S to bring up the scale. I'm gonna set a keyframe on here, one on here, and also I'm gonna make one on here as well. Now on the middle keyframe, 3 frames backward, I'm gonna put another keyframe, and then 3 frames forward, I'm gonna put another one. So the way squash and stretch works in After Effects, when you add a value to X parameter, you need to remove that value from the Y value as well. So let me show you what I mean. For example, if I turn this chain option off, if I add 13 frames for my X value, I need to remove that value from my Y parameter. So right now, watch, when the wall is almost hits the ground, it's gonna squash. Now, when it bounces back, I need to set the X value into 17, and also I need to add 13 to my Y parameter. Now let's easy ease the keyframes. As you see, it looks much more realistic now. You can still exaggerate the numbers by just, for example, I can make it into 150 and then set the Y parameter into 50 as well. And then at the same time, in here, I can put on 150 and 50 again. Keep in mind, the numbers should be equal when you are doing a squash and stretch. Okay, now let's put these 3 principles into a real practice. Okay, we are inside of the After Effects and we're gonna animate this dog. So the way we're gonna animate this dog is that I'm gonna make this dog pops into the box, and after a few seconds it jumps out. So the first step I usually do is that I'm gonna color label everything so I can distinguish the layers from the another. So I'm gonna select the bone and the box, and I'm gonna change its color to yellow, right eye and the left eye into pink, mouth, palm, I'm gonna set them into green. I'm gonna set a purple color for our dog, and line and background color are fine. So the first step that I need to do is that I need to animate the body. But before we do that, we need to parent the related objects together. So let's parent the bone to the box, right eye and the left eye to the dog, and also let's parent the mouth and tongue to the dog as well. So let's select the dog, press P to bring up position. Let's move towards the 1 second, and let's set a keyframe on position. Let's press Shift plus page down on our keyboard to move 10 frames forward. Set another keyframe, and then move back 3 frames and set another keyframe. So on the last keyframe, I'm gonna select it and I'm gonna move my dog down, but let's move the eyes above the box so we see them. Now I'm gonna move it down until here. Now what I'm gonna do is that let's move it a bit down as well. Now what I'm gonna do is that on the second keyframe, I'm gonna create an anticipation by moving the dog up a bit, and then what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna turn the keyframes into easy ease, and then I'm gonna press Shift plus F3 to go towards my graph editor. I'm gonna zoom in a bit, and then I'm gonna adjust the keyframes like so. Let's press B to cut the beginning of our timeline, and let's press N to cut the end of it. Okay, that's nice. Now the second step that I need to do is that I need to hide the extra part of the body. So to do that, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna go towards my rectangle tool. I'm gonna click and drag to create a mask like this. I'm gonna press Enter to call it mask, and then I'm gonna change its color to red, and I'm gonna move it up like this, and on the track mask option I'm gonna set it on alpha invert. Now on the next step, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna move down the bone in a way that it creates a mouth for our character. To do that, I'm gonna select the bone. I'm gonna press P
and R to bring up position and rotation together. I'm gonna move it almost in here. When the character goes down, and then I'm gonna rotate it by -5 degrees, I guess. Yeah, that's nice. And I'm gonna move it down like this. Now, since there is a really small space between keyframes, I'm not gonna turn them into easies. So let's watch. Okay, nice. Now, what we need to do in the next step, we need to animate the box. And now we need to create a squash and stretch for our box. And I think this is the trickiest part because you cannot do it manually by using the scale property. Let me show you what I mean. So if I select the box and then I'm gonna solo it by pressing this little dot on here. If I press S to go towards my scale property and let's move the anchor point down. Even if I turn the chain option off, as you see, it doesn't really create a realistic movement. Well, there is an easy solution for it. Let's go towards our Effects and Preset tab. And let's add a warp effect. Now let's set the warp style into bulge and change the warp axis to vertical. Now, as you see, it looks much more realistic now. Now to animate it, let's go towards our dog keyframes and use them as a reference. So on here, I'm gonna set the bend into 0. I'm gonna set a keyframe, and then on here, I almost gonna set it on 55. Something like this should be fine. Now, what I'm gonna do is that I think we need to move it into 53 or something else. Make it a bit smaller. Okay, now let's adjust the graph editor. To do that, let's press U to bring up the bend keyframes. Select them, press F9 to easy ease them. Now on the graph editor, make the graph the same as body. So like this. Now let's watch our animation. Okay, now let's create blink for our character when he is in the box. Well, there are many ways to create a blink for our character, but the way that I'm gonna animate the eyes are, I'm gonna select the right and left eye. I'm gonna press S and then I'm gonna turn off the chain option for both of them. And then I'm gonna hold Alt and I'm gonna click on this stopwatch. And then I'm gonna peak whip it to the scale of the left eye. Well, in that way, if I change the property of the left eye, I can affect the right eye as well. So in that way, it saves my time, and also I will put less amount of keyframes. Okay, now let's hit stopwatch, 3 frames forward. I'm gonna set it to 0, and then 3 frames forward again. I'm gonna put it back into 100. Now let's watch. Let's move the blink a bit forward. Okay, good. Now, what I'm gonna do as a last step is that I'm gonna hide the tone. Well, to do that, this is really simple. I'm just gonna press T to bring up opacity. I'm gonna set it on 0, and then I'm gonna set a keyframe on it. Now, this is the first part of our animation. Now, on the second step, let's make the dog pops out. Well, to do that, let's extend our time indicator first, and let's zoom out a bit. What I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna animate the dog. Well, to do that, let's close up our keyframes by pressing U, and then reveal it again by pressing U again. And I'm gonna set a keyframe on here. Let's go towards the 2 second. And then 10 frames forward. I'm gonna set another one. And then 3 frames backward, I'm gonna set another one. Well, I'm gonna copy the first keyframe and paste it in here. And then I'm gonna add a bit anticipation by moving dog a bit down. Now let's select these keyframes, go towards the graph editor, zoom in a bit. Adjust the keyframes like so. And let's add a bit follow through and overlap. So let's turn the last keyframe into linear. I'm gonna go towards my bounce expression. And now let's watch. Good. Now let's do the same for our box. Let's reveal its keyframes. Let's go in here. Set a keyframe. Press K to go towards the next keyframe, and press K one more time to go towards the last keyframe. Copy the first keyframe into last one. On the second one, let's stretch the box a bit, and also right click on the position and click on copy expression only, and then press Ctrl+V to apply the expression into box as well. Okay, now let's bring back the bone to its original position. So press P to bring up position and also R to bring up rotation. When the dog pops out, let's set a keyframe, and 1, 2, 3 frames forward, let's copy the first keyframe. Okay, now on here, as you see, we have an awful overlap between the eyes and the box. To fix that, let's go towards the left eye, reveal the properties by pressing U, and then what I'm going to do is that on here, I'm gonna set a keyframe, and when the dog comes out, I'm gonna set another keyframe. I'm gonna set this one into 0. And now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna select these 2 keyframes. I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna click on toggle hold keyframe. Now, what we need to do is that we need to create a bit of space between our keyframes. So I'm going to select them. I'm going to move them a bit forward. Let's also copy the keyframes. Okay, on the last step, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna reveal the thumb once the dog pops out. Well, to do that, let's go on the thumb, press U to reveal the values, set on 0, and when it's on here, almost in here, set it into 100, and then set it on toggle hold keyframe as well. Now let's watch. Okay, the last step that we need to do is that we need to animate the line. So let's go towards the line, press S to bring up scale, turn off the chain option. So when the box goes down, we're gonna stretch it a bit. Set a keyframe, move a few frames forward. And then ease the keyframes. Let's apply the bounce expression. Now, when the dog wants to get out, almost in here. Okay, now as you see, principles of animation can create a huge difference for your animation.